What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 12 preview where I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions to hopefully help you make some decisions as we get closer to that deadline on Saturday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with the Arsenal defence. With news that Ben White is out for 10 to 12 weeks, is it worth going for Timber at 5.5 million to double up with Gabriel, or should we go safe with Saliba or Raya instead? Now, just on the Ben White out for 10 to 12 weeks, that hasn't been officially confirmed yet. And if you look on the FPL page, he's currently orange flagged rather than red flagged. But there has been enough kind of noise going around about his injury that he probably is going to be out until 2025, like 8 to 12 weeks, I would say. And that means he's going to miss quite a few game weeks because of the extra matches that we have in December. So even if he was back on, let's say, the 4th of January, he's going to miss right up until game week 19. So there is potential scope to go for Timber instead, and you would expect his minutes to increase from what they maybe have been over the course of this season. It does feel like a pretty nice price point to go into that Arsenal defence. The only potential issue I see is that Calafiori should be back soon, probably for game week 12, if not game week 13. So he could play left back. You've got Gabriel and Saliba as the centre backs. And obviously then presumably Timber would play right back most games when he's fit and available. But we have seen a few matches where Thomas Partey lines up as the right back and obviously then pushes into central positions as well. So I don't know if Ben White being out guarantees that Timber will play, but his minutes will be much better. And I think if Arteta was able to play the back four of Timber, Saliba, Gabriel and Calafiori regularly, he would. So I think Timber's minutes will be pretty decent. Can I guarantee that he'll play every single game while Ben White is out? No. But I think he will play the large majority. And if you are stuck for money, I don't mind that as a bit of a punt at 5.5. But if you want to play it safe, it has to be Saliba. For 0.5 million more, you guarantee minutes every single week. Like, he's never getting dropped. He's never going to miss out a game for rest and stuff like that. Or it's very, very unlikely. And I just think that sometimes it's worth paying for that extra safety, essentially. But basically, if I had, I don't know, Pedro Porro and no money in the bank, and I didn't want to take a hit, which I think would be fair, I would probably just go to Timber. Or I would try and figure out the funds for the following week and just not rush to get him in. But if I've got the money in the bank, I think I just go for Saliba or Davern Raya. There is obviously another thing to discuss, and that is, will the Arsenal defence be as good? Because Calafiori and Timber, I wouldn't say are players that I would, from what we've seen so far anyway, expect to necessarily stay fit. So if White's missing, then one of Calafiori or Timber misses out in the next couple of weeks. That would make the Arsenal defence slightly weaker. And for people looking to double up, is it really worth it? I still think it probably is. I know they haven't had clean sheets for a while, but I still back that defence. I think it's very good. They've got very good fixtures coming up. Even if Calafiori was to get injured again, or Timber was, I still think the overall structure of that first 11 would be defensively solid. And obviously, you know, these days, a lot of defending is done from the front as well. You've got Odegaard back. We don't yet know about Rice or Saka, but I'm going to presume they're going to be fine for game week 12. I still think a double up on Arsenal defence could be pretty decent going forward. And it is going to be a differential, at least until they get a couple of clean sheets, because people, for the most part, are really put off going there. So I would definitely consider Timber at 5.5, but you have to buy him knowing that there is at least some risk there with his minutes. If you want to play it absolutely safe, it's got to be Gabriel, Raya and Saliba, and that is about it. So nice and simple, what should we do with Rico Lewis? Now, I've got him in my current FPL squad, and my general feeling is, if there comes to a point where I've got a spare transfer and I really need another defender in, then I'll look to get rid of him. But I'm not looking at him in my squad right now thinking he's got to go at all costs. Like, I don't think he's that much of a problem. Essentially, we've got a very cheap Man City defender, and often that is pretty good value. Now, he's 4.9 million, but I would say that most people watching this, if you own him, you probably got him cheaper than that. And I fully appreciate that right now the Man City defence doesn't exactly look watertight, but it's not like other 4.5 to 5 million defenders are keeping a bunch of clean sheets. So potentially there is still value there. The problem is you don't know which games he's definitely going to play in. Like we saw recently, he started against Brighton and Southampton in 9 and 11, but was benched for game week 10. And that's a problem because when he gets benched, he often comes on. So you are running the risk of kind of cameos and stuff like that. But it might be that we see a pattern emerge with his starts. Like if, I don't know, let's say game week 13, Liverpool away, he's benched and Walker and Vardy start. It might be that 3 days later on Wednesday when they play Forest at home, we're a bit more sure that, not necessarily sure, but there's more chance that Rico Lewis would start. And if I had to play Rico Lewis at home to Forest, and I thought there was a good chance he was going to start, I'm probably okay with doing that. I don't feel like I've got to go and get another cheap defender instead. So it probably depends on what the rest of your defence looks like and how many spare transfers you've got. Like for my team, for example, I'm happy to play Gabriel most weeks. Trent is probably a bigger priority than Lewis because he's currently injured, although he might be back soon. We'll have to wait for more information. But also he's taken up a lot more money, so I could reduce him to a different cheap defender. And if Pinnock's available, he's got okay fixtures for the next two. So once I sell Trent, if I buy someone that can play in both 12 and 13, I've got that new signing, Pinnock and Gabriel, to play the next 2 weeks. I don't necessarily have to worry about Rico Lewis right now. And by that point, it's game week 14. I can just reassess. And if it looks like Rico Lewis is going to continue to get pretty good minutes, the fixtures from game week 14 for Man City are pretty decent. So if you can give yourself a couple more game weeks of thinking time, it might not be the worst thing to do. Obviously, you're not buying Rico Lewis right now. And if you are stuck for players and, you know, the rest of your defence are, you know, good options long term, then yeah, maybe you sell Rico Lewis to like a Lewis Hall, an Ait Nouri, Levi Colwell, etc. But I just don't see him as a massive problem. I've said this before, I do find Man City players like this a bit of a headache, and I do find it frustrating in FPL to have to think about when players are going to play. I just like buying 90-minute players. It makes life so much easier. But in the case of Rico Lewis, if you've already got him, he might be worth that headache longer term. And let's not forget, yes, he did get benched in game week 10, but there's been 11 game weeks so far, and he started 9 of them. I appreciate that Kyle Walker was out for a little bit, but he might still get decent enough minutes going forward. He's played a lot of midweek Champions League games for Man City. He may well play the midweek game in game week 14. So he's not so good that you've got to hold on to him in the hope that he plays in 14. But if you've got other stuff to deal with in the next couple of weeks, you could hold on to him. But at the point where you need a new defender and Rico Lewis is there and you're not quite sure in the future when he's going to start, I think he's also perfectly fine just to get rid of. So if you were buying a Brighton forward this week, who's better, Danny Welbeck or João Pedro? Now, I'm not in the market for a new forward myself this week, but if I was buying one, I'm 99% sure that I would go for João Pedro over Danny Welbeck. The only thing that might put me off is if Gjertsås says something in the press conference that João Pedro is not quite ready for a start yet, or if he puts some doubts on that, because obviously his last appearance was in game week 11 off the bench against Man City after being out for a little while. It might be that they think he needs another bench appearance before he's ready to start, but I would assume with the international break, he's had time to had time to improve his fitness, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in that starting 11 against Bournemouth in game week 12. So I would probably go for João Pedro pending any press conference information. And the reason for that is, well, one, he's cheaper, right? He's 5.4 million. Danny Welbeck is 6 million. At some point, João Pedro will probably go up to 5.5. Even then, you're still saving $500,000. We're still assuming as well that João Pedro is first choice penalty taker. They haven't had one this season from what I can remember. Danny Welbeck did take a couple in pre-season, but João Pedro wasn't on the pitch. So I would assume that João Pedro is also first choice penalty taker and he's cheaper. And also you've got those comments from Gjertsås, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like João Pedro is the difference maker for Brighton. Every club has that one player, and for Brighton it's João Pedro. He's also a leader. I would expect him in that starting 11 more often than not. Now, like Timber, can I guarantee you that João Pedro is going to start every single game between like now and game week 20? Absolutely not. But I'm not sure I can guarantee it with Danny Welbeck either. I know up until this point, he's not missed a match, but that might happen when they start getting midweek fixtures. And also it might just happen because they got more players available now. Like João Pedro's been injured, so of course Danny Welbeck's minutes have been a bit better. Ferguson hasn't really done anything special to keep Welbeck out of the team either. But with João Pedro back, that might change. If you remember earlier on this season, I think it was game weeks 2 and 3. Now, to be fair, Welbeck still got 78 and 84 minutes. But I think in both of those games, he came off and João Pedro moved to the number 9 position. So João Pedro, although he often plays as a 10 in this Brighton team, he can play as the 9 as well. And of course, right, there is some risk there because Brighton have so many attacking options. So you could play Mitoma on the left, you could play Adingra on the right, and that would leave someone like Rutter to play as well, who could play as a 10 instead of João Pedro. We don't know when everyone's fit and available the preferred starting 11, but I think it involves João Pedro one way or another, either playing as the 10 or as the 9. And I'm not sure I'd be as certain about Welbeck moving forward. But I will say this, given that he's started every game and he's performed really well and the underlying numbers are decent too, there is every chance that it's just him and João Pedro that will continue to start. And it might be that Danny Welbeck gets more goal scoring chances than João Pedro. I just think, from what Hertzler has said, João Pedro is probably the one, and I think the price difference makes it for me. Like saving 0.6 million when they're quite close as options, I'm taking the who I think will probably be the first choice penalty taker. If we look on Fantasy Football Hub at the stats so far for these two players, and as always, links in the description below, 30% off at the moment, 7-day free trial. João Pedro per 90 minutes is sitting at 0.41 non-penalty expected goals per 90, 0.18 assists. So pretty good. I think Welbeck has slightly higher goal threat so far. Yeah, 0.48 non-penalty XG. So a little bit higher, but his expected assist 0.04. So overall, I just think João Pedro's expected goal involvement is higher, and he's probably on penalties and he's cheaper. Like, he is just where I would go. And it does feel a little bit knee-jerk because obviously he came off the bench against Man City and did so well. But it's just the price. Like 5.4 million, just ridiculous value for what he could offer. Even if he misses like one game over the next 5 or 6, I still really like him. And I think he can stack up well against forwards that are more expensive. Like if he got the minutes, I'm not saying he's as good as someone like Solanke or Isak, but I don't think he's that far off. And there's a huge price difference. So yeah, I rate him quite highly. I've said this already. I think it might have been a little bit of a mistake to buy Strand Larsen last week. I probably should have saved the transfer and got João Pedro now, but there's a bit of hindsight with that, and I'll probably talk about that a bit more in team selection anyway. So both good picks. I would take the cheaper guy. So we've got a couple of player X versus player Y questions, and the first one is Isak versus Jackson. Now, there is a bit of a price difference between the two, but if that's not going to cause a major problem for your future transfers, I think the easy and straightforward decision here is Isak. Like, he's the one on penalties. Jackson doesn't have them because obviously Cole Palmer takes them instead. And I know we probably talk about penalties way more than we should, and there hasn't been a huge amount this season. But when you do get that odd penalty over the space of 6 to 8 game weeks, it's just easy points, right? So Isak's got that to his advantage over Jackson. But the big one is just the yellow card situation. Jackson is 1 yellow card away from a suspension, and Isak isn't. I don't know how many Isak's on, but I don't think it's that many. Let me just have a quick look here. He is currently on yellow cards 0, right? So he's miles away from a suspension. He hasn't had one all season. And I just think that should play a big part in your decision making. Obviously, if you've already got Jackson, you just keep him, right? It's Leicester away. It's a great fixture. You worry about the yellow card suspension when or if it happens. But if you're buying new, there's no comparison here. There's no way I would buy Jackson over Isak. And a few people have said to me that, you know, when Jackson gets that yellow card, that's just his rest out of the way. And Isak might miss a game as well. I get that thinking, but also Isak might just not miss a game. He might just play all these games that he's fit and available for. And at the moment, we don't know when Callum Wilson's going to be back and how much of a part he's going to play because he hasn't had any minutes so far this season. So there is midweek games, right? Newcastle have got Palace in game week 13 on Saturday, Liverpool on Wednesday, and then Brentford on Saturday. It's a quick turnaround, right? There is potential that Isak doesn't start that Liverpool game, but I'd be very surprised. And I think he'll start the 2 either side as well. Then you've got another week's rest until Leicester, another week's rest until Ipswich, etc. Then it's Saturday, Thursday, Monday turnaround, which is just not that bad. I would not be surprised if Isak can keep himself fit if he starts every game between 12 and 18. I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee it about many players at the moment. But I think there is a chance that he just doesn't get a rest unless something crops up. Obviously, he had that toe injury already this season. Whereas with Jackson, you know there's a very high chance that over the next kind of 3-4 game weeks, he's going to miss one because he'll pick up a yellow card. He just does. And it's often for talking to the ref and stuff like that. I think fixture-wise, Chelsea's fixture run for a long time is good. But over the next 5 to 6, the Newcastle fixture run is very good. So I just don't see it, right? Jackson 7.9, Isak I think is 8.5 now. So there's a 0.6 million difference. I think it's worth paying. So that one's a fairly easy one for me. The other one is Mbeumo versus Fernandes, which is a bit trickier because they're both 90-minute players pretty much every single game. They're also both on penalties as well. There is a bit of a price difference here. I think for a lot of people, presumably you're not buying new. I think if you're buying new, then it probably should just be Fernandes because you've got Ipswich away and Everton at home right in front of you. Then I guess Mbeumo's also got Everton away and Leicester at home. And then the fixtures do get a little bit worse for Brentford. I'm not sure what everyone else makes of these fixtures for Brentford. I don't think they're that bad. Like they've been better, but they're not terrible. Like Villa away, Newcastle at home, Chelsea away, Forest at home, Brighton away. Like Mbeumo will get chances in some of these games. Like he's 7.9, so I guess it depends at what price you got him. Fernandes is 8.4, but again, some of you might have got him at 8.2, 8.3. For me, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my own team right now, but it might come down to having to sell Mbeumo or Fernandes for Saka and which one I decide to sell won't have a massive impact on my other moves. I'm probably going to sell Mbeumo. I just see Fernandes as the better option, but there isn't really a huge amount in it. I think if you've got Mbeumo at 7 or 7.1 and selling Fernandes or not buying him instead just means you can make lots of other better moves later on. I would just ignore Fernandes. I know I've joked around about him being essential, but obviously he isn't essential. I think most people get the sarcasm. Yeah, I think if I was buying new, I'd go Fernandes because their prices are quite similar, in which case I would favour him. But if it's a choice of who to sell, it'd probably be about how much I got Mbeumo for and how much that's going to impact other moves. Because if you look at the stats between the two, I think Fernandes actually this year has got very good goal threat compared to normal. So 0.31 expected goals per 90, 0.19 expected assists. So that's about 0.5 expected goal involvement. For Mbeumo, 0.21 non-penalty expected goals, 0.24 expected assists. So that's like 0.45. So Fernandes has better expected goal involvement this season so far. We know Mbeumo is capable of more, by the way, but I'm just going on what's happened so far this season. And Fernandes' goal threat's been higher. I think I just favour him between the two in isolation. But obviously for you, it might come down to how much money you've got, etc., future moves, all that usual stuff. Obviously with Fernandes, there is a slight unknown that Amorim is now coming in. And where will he play? Like some people have said that he might play as one of the deeper midfielders. I'd be surprised if that happens. I've said this before. I just think Fernandes is Man United's best attacker. I don't think there's really too much debate about that. You want him closer to goal. You want him closer to whoever's going to play as the number 9 to thread those balls through. Like he is your creative player. Do you really want him playing that deeper midfield role? I just don't see it. I think it'll be Ugarte or Casemiro. Probably Ugarte because he's played under Amorim before. And then someone next to him like a Mainu possibly. And he's back in training now as well. And then Fernandes is one of the front two. Sorry, is one of the two behind the number 9. So I guess there is some unknown with Fernandes and Amorim and the new setup in general about how well he'll perform. And look, you should forget about the fact he's got 27 points over 2 games. That's not going to continue. But I think he'll just have to play in an attacking role. And I think for me, I would probably want to think about the upside that could be there rather than the downside. And it might be that Amorim just gets Man United attacking a little bit better. It's not going to be like a sudden massive increase, I don't think, where Man United they've been struggling to score goals. Now suddenly they score 4-5 a game, right? It's going to be a little bit of a, slower increase in performances. I can't get my words out. I'm very rusty after an international break. But I think there will be an increase. So I would favour Fernandes. So Isak over Jackson, easy. Mbeumo versus Fernandes, buying new, definitely Fernandes. Selling, if you can, I'd prefer to keep Fernandes. But I don't think I'm super stuck on that. Like if it's easier for you to get Saka or someone else by selling Fernandes, not Mbeumo, I think that's fine. So Man United defence, is it worth it already or should we wait for certainty on selection from Amorim? Now I spoke about Mazraoui in yesterday's transfer tips video and I said at 4.6 million he's potentially really good value, but I probably wouldn't risk it. I'd rather go for a defender at a similar price from another team that you know is going to start most games. And that's the problem with buying Man United defenders in game week 12. If he's going to play a back 3 system, which looks likely, the defenders you really want are the wing backs. But is it going to be Mazraoui that plays? Is it going to be Dalot? Is it going to be both? We just don't know. So you're potentially buying a risk in terms of minutes, and I'm just not sure that is worth it. It could be that one of the Man United wingers plays as a wing back on one side, then it's Mazraoui or Dalot on the other side. So then you're looking at the players that will play in the centre-back positions, and the issue I have with that is there's no guarantee who the favoured three will be. Probably going to be Martinez, De Ligt, and then Euro when he's fully fit and available. But I'm not even sure that's a guarantee because Luke Shaw's back in training. Now, he's probably not going to be available to start just now. We know that his injury record is not great, so he'll probably be out again sooner rather than later. But if he's available, I'm not convinced he necessarily plays as a wing-back. He's very good as a left centre-back. So it could be that he plays instead of Martinez, or at least there's a bit of rotation there. So even if you're looking at someone like Martinez, who's cheap at 4.4, you do have a bit of threat from Luke Shaw, and also he's on 4 yellow cards, right? So I don't know if I'd want to go there. Then you're looking at De Ligt. He is the one defender that I would be very surprised to see benched anytime going forward. But he's also 5 million. He does have some threat from set pieces. We've seen that before. I think he's already got 1 goal this season. Am I willing to pay 5 million when I can go and get Hull for 4.4, Levi Colwell for 4.5? Like, I'd basically be making a bet that Man United defence is going to suddenly improve massively under Amorim, and I'm not sure I'm convinced at that. Like, I'm not worried about the fact they play Arsenal and City away in 14-16 because at 5 million or below, you can just bench these defenders. It's not a problem. So you could just play them against Ipswich, Everton and Forest, which are fine. But then you look at Chelsea's fixtures and they've got pretty much... There's not really a huge amount of games that you'd be worried about having to play them in. Leicester away, Villa at home, Southampton away. I'd play them in all 3 of them. Villa fans, I get it. It's not an easy fixture, but if you had to play your 4.5 million defender and he doesn't get any points, like, so be it. Spurs away, not great. Then Brentford at home, Everton away, Fulham at home, Ipswich away, Palace away. You can just play him in pretty much all these games. And not only do you save 0.5 million, but there is no guarantee that the Man United defence will become better than the Chelsea one. And I just think, like, I know I've just said with Fernandes, I'd maybe keep him over in Mbeumo and play for the upside that Man United will improve in attack. I'm not sure there's a massive amount of upside in betting on the defence. Because at 5 million, De Ligt is not super cheap. And I think Mazraoui is probably the one with the most potential value, but I just can't guarantee you he's going to play. So people keep asking me about Man United defence. It comes up in the questions quite a lot. And the honest answer, I just don't think it's worth the headache. I really don't. Like, even Martinez at 4.4, I don't think he's necessarily completely nailed on. I think Luke Shaw's a very good left centre-back. I think he could fit into that role really well and not have to play as the wing-back. And it probably would be good for his fitness as well. So De Ligt's probably the only one that I would say with any certainty will start the majority of games. I think he has to. But even then at 5 million, I'm not convinced it's worth it. So what do we do with Trent Alexander-Arnold if we don't get any new information? Now, the first thing to say is we probably will get new information because obviously we'll have press conferences on Thursday and Friday. And Arne Slot is quite open in giving us timelines on players. I wouldn't say he's quite as good as Ange Postecoglou, but I don't think he's that far off. So if Trent's going to miss Southampton, I think Slot will tell us. So if you've kept him up until this point, you might as well wait a couple more days to get the latest information. Obviously, I'll talk about that again in the final thoughts video. My general feeling right now is if Trent is ruled out for the Southampton game in 12, or is even a slight doubt, for me, he's probably got to be sold. Like, I was up for keeping Trent as a differential when you got that Southampton game, but if you're going to miss that, and then it's City at home, Newcastle away straight away afterwards, I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets. I still think from game week 15 onwards, Trent could be a really nice differential because although he's only got 1 assist so far, I think his attacking numbers are better than what he's delivered on. So I think his output in terms of attacking returns might go up a bit. I don't think it's going to get to the levels of under Klopp because I think he is a bit more reserved as a right back under Arne Slot. But I still think there's more potential there in terms of the attacking returns. And obviously from a defensive point of view, Liverpool are great. So 15 onwards, pretty decent. But it's whether or not you can keep 7 million for the next 3 games. Like, if he misses Southampton, you don't really want to have to play him against City unless you absolutely need to. And even Newcastle away is kind of tough to get a clean sheet. Like, if he was fine for 12, I would accept that I've got to play him against Newcastle and he might not get a clean sheet. That would be fine. But once you miss the Southampton game, it makes the next 2 so much worse to have to look at. And it's not like he's super cheap either. So I think downgrading him to someone, you know, at that 4.5 to 5 million level and having that money for attacking moves instead is probably the way to go. If your team is set up in a way where the money from Trent is not really needed, you've got other defenders you can play, and he's only going to be out for 1 or 2 games, I don't mind holding on to him. But obviously you'll have to decide that, you know, on an individual level about whether or not you're happy to hold him. Like I said, I was happy to keep him, maybe downgrade Lewis to then do Fernandes to Saka. So my original move was Lewis down to someone like, let me just bring it up here, someone like Lewis Hall, and then that would give me 2.1 million in the bank, which is enough to go from Fernandes straight to Saka. But now I'm thinking, is it really worth that just to keep Trent, who has got a bit of an issue? And even if he is back, by the way, for 12 or 13, there is then a midweek game. Will Slot take a risk with him, especially when they got big Champions League games coming up as well? So that has put further doubt in my mind, where I think it's actually worth just keeping Fernandes, keeping Lewis for now, selling Trent for, let's just say it's Lewis Hall. That then gives me 4.3 million to spend. Instead of selling Fernandes, I could sell Mbeumo for Saka and still have money in the bank, right? So Trent to Hall and then Mbeumo to Saka. I've still got 1.7 to spend. So I will die on the hill that if Trent is fully fit and available and starts every game from kind of 15 onwards, he's going to be great and we're probably going to want him back sooner rather than later. But I don't think he's so good that I'm willing to bet on that, and I'd rather just have the money spent elsewhere. So no information or information that he's a doubt or out for 12. I think for most people you're looking to sell. So is Son to Saka worth the free transfer? Now, obviously, we need to wait for more information about Saka because he's currently yellow flag. But let's just assume that he's fit and available for game week 12. If I had no other issues to deal with this week, I think this is a good use of a free transfer. I suspect that most people that own Son were already planning to make this move. I think it's fine to do that. Like, Son's fixtures aren't that bad after Man City. I said this weeks ago, right? If you got stuck with Son, it wouldn't be a massive problem. Because after City, you got Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home, Southampton away. It's not terrible. And also, Spurs will probably cause Man City a few problems. So Son could go and get you a return in 12 anyway. So I don't see Son as like a major problem or anything like that. But if I was choosing between the two to have from this point forward, it would definitely be Saka. As good as Forest have been defensively so far this season, you'd rather play Forest at home than City away. Then you've got West Ham away, which is a nice fixture. Man United at home, who knows how tough that will be, but you're not going to be worried about having to play Saka in that game. Fulham away, Everton at home. The fixture run is just great for a long time for Arsenal attackers. So I think it's a good use of a free transfer. But you'd rather have Saka this week than Son. Simple as that. If you've got other problems to deal with, I wouldn't view Son as a major problem in your team. You could just keep him for another week or two. You could get Saka in later on. One thing I would say is I certainly don't think Saka is absolutely essential to own in game week 12. If you've got him and he's fit and available, great, right? You've got a bit of a differential on your hands as the rest of us try and bring him in at some point soon. But because of captaincy, I don't feel like a pressure to buy him. Like in game week 12, you'd rather captain probably at least Palmer, so Palmer against Leicester, Salah against Southampton, or even Haaland against that Spurs defence than Saka. So Saka would probably be the 4th best captain for me in game week 12. Then in game week 13, when he's got West Ham away, Palmer's got Villa at home, which is not that much worse, I would say, given that you've got the home factor there. You could go Saka, but I would expect that most people that own him just won't captain him. I just don't see it. And then game week 14, obviously, when he plays Man United, Palmer's got Southampton away. So I don't think there's a massive pressure to buy Saka, but if there's a choice between the two for game week 12 onwards, I'm taking Saka over Son. I just don't see Son as a major problem either. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcasts as well. And I'll be back tomorrow for the team selection video.